Okay, so hopefully you can all see the slides now. In terms of what we're going to be covering today, I'll just start with some housekeeping. I'll give you a tiny little bit of background about the team. I will talk about some of the work that we've done to improve our service, and then I'll get on to the details fundamentally about applying for a primary school place and what you need to know. In terms of housekeeping, there's lots of people on the call today, so if you can all ensure you're on mute, please. Obviously, if you need to ask a question, there'll be the facility for Q&A at the end. Equally, if you want to put any questions in using the chat facility as we're talking, you can absolutely do that. And if we don't get to all of your questions today, we will pick them up and do an FAQ and put that on our website afterwards. In terms of any questions that you may have, if you can just please try and keep them general and not include any child-specific information like names, dates of birth, anything like that, just because this is a webinar that will be shared on our website. As we get to the end and there is Q&A, you can use the hand up function and I will pick off people just in the order in which they've done that. And I think that's everything there is to cover on housekeeping. Okay, I'll just move on to a bit of a general intro about the team and the work that we've been doing. So the admissions service is a really busy service. We have about 80,000 calls every year. We have about 25,000 applications come through us as a team. And typically for people who are applying for reception school places, we'll have about 7,000 people every year apply for a reception school place in Warwickshire County Council. And we know that there are aspects of the sort of deciding on a school place that are not necessarily easy, and we think that it's sort of part of our purpose to help you as parents make that decision about what a suitable school place for your child might be by providing you with the right information at the right time. In terms of the team, I've sort of mentioned I've got some colleagues here today. So we've got Louise who leads the team, and Amy who's our technical expert, and we've got sort of Catherine who will just absolutely put her hand at everything. The scope of the team is around in-year applications. So this is people who want to move schools within a school year. So perhaps they've already got a school place somewhere, and for whatever reason they want to change schools, often because they're moving. We have people go through what we call transfer applications. That's because their child needs to transfer to reception, transfer to junior school, or transfer to secondary school. We also process free school meals, and we aren't responsible for school transport, but we get involved in lots of queries around school transport. We deliver the 11 plus exams, so something that I think if you're focusing on reception and junior, you're probably not going to be too worried about at the moment, but that's a sort of a chunk of work. We have about 2,500 children sit the test for the 11 plus every year. And we also deal with school appeals. So ultimately, if you're not happy with the offer you receive, one of your options is to appeal and appeal against that offer. And we're involved in overseeing those appeals as well. So fairly broad remit, really busy team. And as I said, we try and focus on our purpose, which is to help parents decide on what a suitable school place is by giving you the right information at the right time and doing the best job we can of processing those applications in a really timely way. So in terms of what you need to know when you're deciding on what schools to apply for reception and junior, I think first off is really just to focus on what your child is likely to need and what your family circumstances are. I know that you'll have friends and there'll be some schools that are more popular than other schools, but I think specifically about your family circumstances, what schools perhaps are close by, how your child might get to school, what sort of subjects they offer, what the facilities are. You might be interested in whether or not they have breakfast club, after school club. You'll also be interested in things like their Ofsted rating, and you can get all of that information online, certainly from our website, Warwickshire County Council, and also directly from the schools' websites. We suggest that you go and visit the schools, because although you can read a lot about them in an Ofsted report, it's not the same as going and getting a really good sense of what that school is about. Sometimes the Ofsted reports were several years. They were written several years ago, and circumstances at the schools might have changed. So we suggest that you go and visit the open days. Specifically for applying for a school place, there's something really important that you need to know, which is the deadline. And I believe the deadline, Amy will correct me if I'm wrong, is the 15th of January. So first and foremost, make sure you get your application into us on time by the 15th of January 2023. And the reason that's important is because if you don't get your application to us on time, that application won't be considered with all of the others. It will be considered after all of the others have been processed, and you're therefore less likely to get your first or second preference. So really important that you apply on time. I think particularly for reception age children, they're really young, so it's going to be unlikely that that they will have sort of really, really obvious needs at this point that are perhaps different to other children, but that's not going to be the case for all children. So if you have particularly got your child at nursery, I think it's really useful to talk to the nursery and get a sense of what they're like in that sort of slightly more formal education type setting. Equally, if you are aware of sort of any additional needs that they do have, you can contact us and talk about those, and we can give you some advice. And particularly, you would want to be mentioning that when you're going around the school open days. You might want to understand what their SEND provision is, that special educational needs. In terms of other things to sort of focus on, there's a lot of information on our website. We've done a video that I will share in a couple of minutes, which again gives you just some pointers, and we get a lot of hits with it, and people find it really, really useful. You can obviously contact us as a service, and we can give you some information. What we can't do is advise you on what choices you have to make, but we can give you some advice on the sorts of things that you would be looking at. There's some queries that people often have around sort of being in a catchment area, and does that guarantee that you will get a place at that school? And no, it doesn't guarantee that you will get a place at that school. What we find is that some schools are oversubscribed, and what we mean by that is they have more people apply for them than they do have places. And in those situations, when we're allocating the places, we follow the criteria set by the school. It's called the oversubscription criteria. You'll be able to find it on their website, and that will list the order in which we basically have to process them. So it's typically, if a child is sort of looked after or a child in need, they're often sort of first on the list. Then it's often if you're in catchment and have a sibling at the school, in catchment area, and then out of catchment area with a sibling at the school. So it will vary subtly from school to school, but there's some of the things to bear in mind. So if your local schools are popular, then definitely have a look at the oversubscription criteria and understand how that relates to you, because just because you're in the catchment area, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to get a place. There's some other points really to know about how you fill the application in. So you have up to 6 preferences that you can make. That means you can list up to 6 schools, and we suggest that you list at least 3 schools that you'd be happy with. So it's your first preference, but then a plan B and a plan C that you would also be okay with. And we hear lots of myths around this. I think there's a perception that if you just put down one school, you're guaranteed to get that school. That's not necessarily the case at all. If that school is oversubscribed and you're perhaps on the outskirts of the catchment area or out of the catchment area and you don't have a sibling at the school, it could be that you don't get a place at that school. If you haven't listed a second and third preference, we will then just give you a place that is available at the next nearest school. It might be one you're happy with, it might not be one that you're happy with. So quite important that you think carefully when you're filling in your application about the first 2 or 3 schools that you would be happy with, and that's first preference, and then plan A and plan B. Okay. In terms of making those preferences, other factors to consider is about what's realistic. So there might be a really good school that's 6 miles away. Particularly if it's a popular school, you'll be unlikely to get that school, even if you list it as one of your preferences. So have a think about that. And we've said on here, try and use at least 3 preferences, and it's for the reasons that I've said. We will obviously allocate people. It's all done automatically by the system as far as possible their first preference. But if we can't, we will continue to go down the preference list. And if you haven't got a second and third preference in there, then you might be in a situation where you get an unplaced offer, and as I mentioned, that will be the first available school that we can offer you, and that's not always sort of compatible with what you need or want. So consider that. I think we've talked about some of the things you might want to try and understand about the schools in your area. So by going to the open days, get a good sense as to what they're like, what their provisions are for breakfast clubs, after school clubs, and equally the subjects they teach, what their sort of additional needs, their Senko provision is like, pastoral care, facilities, etc., etc. We also mentioned that it's important to think about how your child's going to get to school. There's no guarantee with any school that you'll get school transport automatically. So you might want to sort of factor in, do you need to be able to walk to school? Is it something that you can do on a bus or a drive? And equally, I think sort of the most important point that we started with about 5-10 minutes ago is really just think about your child and think about the sort of setting that you think might suit them. If they're at a nursery school, speak to the nursery school and use that as your starting point. I mentioned that there's various resources available online. So you can go to our website. There's a link here. We'll share this presentation with everybody who's been here today and put it online. We've also sort of set out a parent guide which covers much of what we've talked about today. There's a video that I will share in a minute just before we move on to the Q&As, and there's also a form. So if you're looking at all of this and you're just not sure what to do, then you can by all means call us. Sometimes our call wait times are long. So equally, if it's helpful, there you can fill in a form. It's a very, very short form, and we will then call you back. So all of that's available. I'll start with the primary school video, and then I'll stop talking and I'll see what questions people have.
To a junior school. Starting school for the first time or moving to a junior school can feel like a big step, but there's lots of things you can do to make it easier on you and your child, and we're here to help.
Hello?
Rebecca, we've lost the sound on the video.
Hello?
Okay. Did you say there's no sound on the video?
Yeah, we can't hear anything.
Okay, I'm not sure why that's happening. What I'll do is I'll try and figure that out in a minute. I'll put the link in the chat, and while I'm figuring that out, I suggest we go onto the Q&A. So there's some questions in the chat. So if I just stop sharing my screen, I'll see if I can figure out what's going on with the video, and I'll have a look at the questions. So, Amy, we've got one here in the chat, and it says, will we arrive in Warwickshire with 3 kids? What to do with the 3 kids? How do we get them in the same school? And we've got a reception a year 3 and a year 5. So reception a junior and a year 5. Are you okay to pick that up?
Yeah, of course.
Thanks.
So the admissions team hold vacancy data for all year groups. For children starting reception, it's a little bit different. Because we know there's a certain amount of places. The children that need to move schools who have already gone past reception, we can tell you what schools have got vacancies in the year groups that you need at the time that you're going to make your application. I would advise that you don't make your application any earlier than 20 school days of moving into Warwickshire, because we can't hold a place for longer than that for you. So as soon as you know your moving date, if it's within 20 school days, give us a call. We'll let you know what vacancies are in the area that you're moving to. But just bear in mind, we may not be able to get all 3 children into the same school. So don't presume that will be the case. We'll try and get them all into at least one of your preferences, but it might not be the same school for all 3. If it's not the same school for all 3, then you can talk to our home to school transport team, and they may be able to offer some advice on helping you get each of the 3 children to school. But the first thing to do is phone the team and see what vacancies are available at the schools in the area that you'll be moving to. You're on mute, Rebecca.
Thank you. I'll go to another question from the chat, and then I can see somebody's put his hand up, so we'll pick that up second. But there's one in the chat here which I think is a really common scenario that we come across. I'll read it out. Where's it gone? So I mentioned, I think, that the deadline for applying is the 15th of January. So the question here is, we've recently bought a house, but we may not have exchanged prior to the 15th of January, which is a deadline for application. So what do you advise that we do?
Okay, so if you're moving into Warwickshire, we have an extended deadline for families that are moving, and that deadline is the 1st of February next year, so 2023. As long as you are living in your new property by the 1st of February, you can still make an on-time application to Warwickshire for Warwickshire schools or schools in the surrounding authorities, and we will accept the application. But you have to be living in the new property by the 1st of February. We will require documentation to support that, and that is either a full signed copy of your tenancy agreement if you're renting the new property, or a copy of your completion letter from your solicitor if you've purchased the property. And you can just send us an email of that document to the admissions email address.
And I'll put the admissions email address in the chat. It's available on our website as well. Okay. I can see Anthony Pritchard's got his hand up. If you'd still like to ask your question, if you can just come off mute, please.
Hi, yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Hi.
Perfect. So it's a little bit complicated, but I'm moving to Warwickshire from the 16th of next month. This month now, December. But my daughter lives up north with her mum in Merseyside. Me and my partner are also undergoing surrogacy, and so we're going to be in Cyprus awaiting passports at the time my daughter's due to start school, and she is supposed to be living with us and starting school in Warwickshire. So we're not sure what to do and where we can go, because we're not going to be in the country when she starts school, but she is going to be going to school and living with us.
How likely after September do you think it'll be, Anthony?
So the due date for the babies are the 23rd of July, so we should only be out of the country probably till mid to the end of September. It's going to be 2 to 4 weeks after the start of school.
That's fine. Okay, so what you can do, make your application now as normal. We'll offer your child a place on offer day in April. Accept the place at that point as you would normally if they were going to start in September. But what you can do at that point is the school that's been offered, you just need to liaise with them on a start date. Legally, a child doesn't have to start school until the term after their 5th birthday. So legally, children don't have to start in reception until the earliest is January 2024 for this cohort. But you need to make that arrangement with the school that's been offered as soon as the place has been offered. And legally, the school has to hold that place for your child until they start.
Okay, that's perfect.
That makes sense.
Even though we're only moving in on the 16th of this month, are we okay to start that application now?
Have you got the signed tenancy or a copy of the completion letter?
So we've had the intention to complete, which means we are legally moving on the 16th. There is no ifs or buts around that now.
Send us a copy of that and we'll let you know if it's sufficient.
All right, okay, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your question. Monica Sturley.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hi, Monica.
Hi, Rebecca. Hi, Amy. So I was the person who asked the question around the exchange date. So forgive me just after further clarification, to be honest, because we all know what house moves can be, you know, dates can move. So forgive me, but prior to January, so before January 15th, we submit the application as normal or just wait till February 1st?
I would see what the situation is at the 15th of January. Do you live in a different authority to Warwickshire now?
Yeah.
Okay. So see what the situation is on the 15th of January. If the move isn't likely to happen by the 1st of February at that point, make the application on the 15th of January through your current authority. So it's a national closing date, the 15th of January. It's the same for every authority in England. So, and you're not penalising yourself by waiting until that last day to do your application. So I would say wait until then, see what the situation is at that point. And if you need further advice, give us a call and we can let you know what we'd advise you do at that point.
Because more than likely we have spoke to our solicitor about it and they can provide documentation to review because they're pushing for at least an exchange by January 15th. So is that acceptable or does it need to be a completion?
Moving into Warwickshire, we'd accept exchange of contracts.
Okay, great stuff. Thank you so much.
We'd prefer completion letter, but we will accept exchange of contracts.
By January 15th. Okay, so we should be in a space where
you've got until the 1st of February. So if you could do exchange of contracts by the 15th of Jan and then follow up with a completion by the 1st of February, you've covered yourself from more than the angles that we need.
Okay, thank you both. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just coming with the list.
Can you hear me?
Hi, so we've got is it Lynette?
Amel.
Lynette, yeah.
Okay, so if you want, Lynette, I know you've got your hand up, so if you want to ask the question, that'd be great. And if there's somebody else that wants to ask a question, if you could just use the sign to put your hand up and we'll come to you. Thank you.
Sorry, how do I put my hand up?
What's your name?
My name is Amel. I couldn't use the team thing and I missed the beginning, so.
Okay, Amel,
so I have a question.
We'll come to you next, Amel, after Lynette's question.
Okay, no problem. That's fine.
Okay. Hi, Lynette. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you. I have a child at an infant school in year 2. So when I tried to apply for year 3, I noticed that the junior schools within my catchment area are a bit further than the primary schools on the year 3 transfer list. So now I was a bit confused. Should I do both? Pick, say, 2 from the junior and then maybe 4 from the transfer? I didn't know what to do exactly, so I just got stuck.
It's a good question. It's probably one that a lot of people get confused with. So on the junior transfer, you can only apply for junior schools. You can't apply for primary schools. So what I'd suggest you do, Lynette, is apply for the junior schools in the local area by the 15th of January deadline, and then that's one thing done out of the way. If you also want to be considered for any of the primary schools in your local area, you'll have to follow a slightly different process, and that's our in-year admissions process. Now, that won't commence before the summer holidays in all likelihood. So it's a long way down the road. It is something you'll be able to do, but the most important thing for you at the moment is to apply for junior schools.
Right. Sorry, Amy. Yes, still on that one. The junior schools are quite far from where I live, and the actual primary school, which is very close, just about less than a mile away, is actually on the transfer list. So should I just ignore it again and go with the juniors? Or
it won't let you apply for primary schools on the transfer application. Yeah, so get the junior schools on. Then at least that way we've guaranteed your child a place at a school for September, because when you come to apply for the primaries, it might be that they've got no spaces. So we need you to do it this way so we can guarantee your child a place for somewhere for September.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And Amy, I'm just wondering, it might not be an option depending on the family circumstances, but she could theoretically apply for an in-year move now, couldn't she, in year 2? It would mean unsettling the child, but she could apply for a primary school now for year 2.
Yeah. You could do, yeah.
Oh, thank you. All right, thank you. I will do.
Okay, thanks for that. Amel, are you still there?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So I'm really, really stressed about all of this. So I moved into rugby from London, so in Warwickshire, and so I wanted to send my daughter to a private school. It's very oversubscribed, and unfortunately she didn't get in. So now I have to look at the schools around me. So my question is, can we make a list of the schools that we definitely don't want our children to go to, or not? Because I know we can make a list of 6 schools that in order of preference, but my worry is if she doesn't get into these schools that I prefer because they are about 2 miles away from my house, I'll get a place in the school that I definitely don't want to go to. So would you take into consideration if I also wrote, for instance, a cover letter of schools that I definitely don't want my daughter to go to?
So 2 things to cover there. The first thing is easiest, so I'll do that first. So you mentioned that the preferred schools, you might be getting a school that's a couple of miles away. Now, but for everyone's benefit, I can tell you that if you are offered a school that is more than 2 miles away in a walking route, your child is entitled to free home to school transport, and the local authority would have a legal obligation to get your child to and from school every day. So if the school is over 2 miles in a walking route for children under the age of 8, the local authority has a legal duty to get the child to and from school every day.
Okay, so but that's fine because I can drive so I don't work and my husband works from home, so we have no problem at all driving our daughter to school. It's just these schools that I like are about 2 miles away from my house, and they are very likely to be oversubscribed because if I like them, I'm sure other parents love them too. They are outstanding on Ofsted and they're really good. Because I live in the town centre and around me there is a lot of schools, and unfortunately the town centre is a little bit rougher than the villages around. So the schools that are close to me are either religious, so Catholic, which I'm not, so I can't send my daughter to a Catholic school, or the other ones are requiring improvement on Ofsted. And when I went to visit them, I really could not picture my daughter in that type of school. So I want to apply for these schools that are further away, but I'm really worried that because I'm not in their catchment, I won't get a space there, and then I'll be given a school that is actually around my house, which I really don't want to.
I understand. So let me cover that point then. So I don't want to dissuade you from putting supporting information with your application. By all means, you can write a covering letter to support your application. Our online application system also allows you to put reasons for each school preference that you're applying for. However, that won't be taken into account when we allocate school places. I'll be completely honest with you. We allocate places based on oversubscription criteria, and personal preference doesn't really come into it. We ask you to rank your school preferences 1 to 6 or 1 to 4, however many you're putting on the application, for the simple fact that if we can offer a place at more than one of your preferences, we will offer the highest one we can. We don't take that ranking into consideration for any other reason. It's purely if we can offer you a place at more than one of the schools that you've named. The local authority, so if you don't live in Warwickshire, it'll be the same for your home authority. Warwickshire has a legal duty to offer each child a school place. There is no legal duty on an authority to offer you one of your preferred schools or a school that you've applied for. The duty is to offer a school place. It might not be a school that you like, but if that's a situation that you find yourself in, then there is an appeal process, and that is outside of the school admissions process. It's a legal process, and it's administered by an independent panel who have the authority to offer places above and beyond the admission number that we've offered at a school. They can listen to personal circumstances. They can consider factors that we can't consider as part of the admissions process, but you can't initiate that until after the school places have been published in April.
I think it's a common scenario where you're sort of looking at the schools that are nearby, and you're thinking for whatever reason that they're perhaps not the schools for your child. And Amy's absolutely right that with the sort of the national system, you can specify preference, but it's you don't get a choice per se. It's a preference, and then we apply sort of the rules, and we apply them consistently and fairly across every child that's applied, and we allocate places on that basis. So I think particularly for you in the circumstances that you've set out, no, you can't tell us the schools that you don't want, but I think it sounds like it's probably worth really thinking about what your 6 preferences might be. So it sounds like you're really clear on what your first preference would be, but what a viable sort of plan B, C and D would be, I think is important.
I'm clear on 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. After that, I'd rather not send my daughter to school at all and do it myself than send her. So but all these schools that are in my 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 are also very oversubscribed, and I'm worried she won't get into any of them.
Yeah, so, and I mean, it sounds like you're really clear on your preferences, and we do always suggest that you include your catchment school, because that's the school that you are most likely to get. But I hear that you obviously have your reasons why, and I think it does sound like you're sort of clear really to some extent on what your sort of plan B ultimately is, which is you would home educate by the sounds of it if you didn't get one of your preference schools, and as Amy said, there is the facility to appeal, and you can sort of set out the reasons why you feel that you should get a place at a given school at appeal. But key on lots of these things is having a look at the oversubscription criteria as well. Amy, do we offer the distances that we offered to? Do we do that for primary on the website?
Yes, so we have a document on our website. It's called Breakdown of Offers. If you have a look at the 2022 entry version, that will show you how many places and what was the lowest ranked criteria we offered to last year. I think 21 entries also on there. So you'll have a couple of views of data to consider.
Yeah.
And that is helpful, because it does give you an indication as to, right, if these schools I like are 3 miles away from me, and in the last year or two they only offered to children that perhaps live within 2 miles of the school, it sort of helps manage your expectations about how likely it is.
Yeah. Well, I've asked all of these questions to the schools, and they said it all depends on the birth rate of that year and how many children same age as my daughter are starting. So my hope is I have put her at nursery in that school, and they still have spaces. So I'm hoping that their reception is not going to be too busy, since they still have spaces in the preschool. So yeah. But having her at preschool in that school does not help, isn't it? With the application.
So that was the point I was going to follow on with. So, and it links with a question that we've had in the chat about wraparound. So if your child attends the nursery at a school, it does not guarantee them a place in reception at that school. And for the majority of schools, it has no bearing on how we allocate places. You still have to apply for school places for a reception place, even if your child attends a nursery.
I'm just hoping that if I have to appeal, then her going to nursery or preschool there might help, since all her little friends, she'll be separated by, if she changed school.
Yeah,
she'll be separated by all the people she knows.
It's absolutely valuable information that can be taken into account by an appeal panel. It just can't be taken into account by us through the normal admissions process. And the same with wraparound. Your need for wraparound for your child cannot be considered in the admissions process. So if you need before and after school clubs, and that's the reason you're applying for a school, it's just something that it's not something we can consider. It's not part of any school's oversubscription criteria. So it's not something that will make any difference to your application.
Mel, thank you for your questions. I'm going to move us on now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Rostain, you've got your hand up.
Yeah.
Sorry, is that your surname?
Yeah, no, it's my turn. Yeah, no problem. I have a question. We do not live. We will move. I mean, from France to England this summer, but we know where we would like to live. I mean, because we know where we would like to live in which city, but we were wondering, do we have to apply now for reception, or do we have to wait until this summer? What do we have to do? Because we do not have any address at that moment.
Yeah, so you can't apply until you've got a Warwickshire address. But as soon as you've got that, give us a call or drop us an email, and we'll tell you. It doesn't sound like you'll be in time for this process, the January the 15th process, but we will be allocating places right up until the 31st of August. So if your move does happen before then, contact us and we'll let you know what you need to do at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next question is it Shafi Bilal?
Hello, hi. First of all, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this meeting. It answers a lot of questions for us. This question might have been asked before, I'm not sure. One of the parents was asking about, the child is in grade 2 and, is planning to be transferred to grade 3, and none of the primary schools will be coming into the list for the preference. I was wondering, you said something about in-year process, would you mind telling me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the in-year admissions process is how you'd apply for school places if your child wasn't starting school in reception, or they weren't transferring from infant to a junior school, or they weren't starting year 7 in secondary school. So it's the process that we follow for a change of school in any other year group. And the reason that primary schools are included in that process is because year 3 isn't the normal point of entry for a primary school. Their normal point of entry is reception, and then children would automatically transfer to year 1, year 2, year 3, so on. So if you want to apply for a primary school, you can do, but it's a different process that you'll follow. It's the in-year admissions process. And like I said earlier, that won't start before the summer holidays. We haven't got a confirmed date yet, I don't believe, but it won't be before the school holidays, the summer holidays next August.
Okay.
Well,
no, sorry, please continue. Sorry, my apologies.
No, what the rest of what I was going to say isn't relevant, so you carry on.
My question was, does having EHCP for your child makes any difference?
If you have a what, sorry?
I think it's EHCP.
Yeah. Okay,
yes, it does. Yes. So if your child has an education, health and care plan or an EHCP, the school admission process is very different. You wouldn't apply for a place through the school admissions team. You would need to contact your child's plan coordinator, and their school place would be confirmed through Sendar. And that's a separate process because it involves consultation with schools about how they can meet your child's needs. And then the school that they're offered is named within their plan, and legally that school has to take your child if their school is named on that plan. So it's a completely different process.
Okay, so meanwhile, I'm in the process of getting the approval from the EHCP.
Yeah.
So the first step would be I write down the 6 preference of the junior schools so that my son is still having a school in September 2023.
Yeah.
The second step would be to wait for summertime for the in-year application to come out so that I can go for the primary school. And the third step is if the EHCP is done before the summer vacations, I get in touch with the one of the members of the planning so that the school that they mentioned will be obliged to give my son the enrollment seat or whatever you want to say in that regards. Is that right?
That's right, yes. And they should be in touch with you throughout every stage of that process anyway. They'll notify you when they're consulting schools. They will ask you what your preferred schools will be. So it may be the case that your child moves into a primary school in year 2. It depends when their plan is approved.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amy and Rebecca. Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. Jake.
Hi, yeah, it's Jake, but I'm not a man. I've just got a really quick question. So within the order that we want to put our preferences in, our first preference is slightly out of catchment. So I had a look at that online criteria you mentioned earlier, and we would fit within that, but obviously it might vary for this year. So we're just out of catchment. I think it's like 0.2 of a mile. If we then put our catchment school as the second option, how does that work in terms of if we didn't get accepted into the one that was slightly out of catchment 4, would we automatically get in the catchment school, or would that like knock us down the list for that catchment school because we put it second?
Okay, good question. So no one is guaranteed an offer at their catchment school. No one's guaranteed an offer at any school unless your child's got an EHC plan. So that's the first kind of myth to bust.
Okay.
However, when considering your order of preference, the way it would work in that situation is we look at your first preference. If we can offer a place at that school, we'll make the offer. We'll withdraw the application for all the other schools that you've named, and they won't be looked at any further. If we can't offer a place at your first preference school, we'll refuse a place at that stage. Your child will automatically go on the waiting list for that school. What we then do is we'll look at your second preference school as though it was your first, and we'll consider we'll look at if a place can be offered. Your child isn't ranked in any way, dependent on where you've named the school on your application. It makes absolutely no difference to how their application is considered. We have to operate what we call an equal preference system. So we consider all the schools that you've named on your application in the same way. We don't penalise you because you haven't put a certain school first. And similarly, we don't give you higher priority for a place just because you have named a school first.
Okay, brilliant. That clarifies. Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you. There's a question here in the chat, which I think this might apply to lots of people. It says, is it possible to apply for a junior school, so a year 3 through the transfer process, if they are currently in primary school?
Yes, is the answer. You can, yes. So you can't apply for a primary school within the junior transfer round, but you can apply for a junior school regardless of which school your child currently goes to. As long as they're in year 2, they can apply for a junior school. However, bear in mind that the oversubscription criteria for the majority of our junior schools gives a higher priority of places to children who attend the infant feeder schools for the junior school they're applying for. So if they attend the infant that's linked to that junior school, they've got a better chance of getting a place compared to someone who's attending a primary school who's applying for that same junior school. It's not all junior schools that do it that way, but it's the majority.
Brilliant, thank you, Amy. And I just wonder if it's worth sort of mentioning about the proof of address as well, and just sort of highlighting the need to upload that with the application and the typical sort of proof of address that we accept.
Yeah, so when you make your application online, you have the facility to upload documents. Now, the documents that you'll need to upload in respect of a school application is proof of the child's home address. So what we ask for is a copy of your council tax bill. So the 2022-23 council tax bill, just upload a copy onto your account, follow the instructions. If you have trouble uploading a document to your account, or you are not applying online, you're applying via a paper form, you can email us a copy of your council tax bill. If you're not the council tax payer for the property, contact us. We'll let you know what alternative documentation we'll accept.
Great, thank you. And I wonder as well if it's also worth mentioning the educated out of year group point as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
you're testing me here, Rebecca. So as I mentioned earlier, in England, the law states that a child doesn't have to start school until the term after their 5th birthday. So legally, no child needs to start reception until January 2024. However, Warwickshire makes provision for all children that are aged 4 or over to start reception in the September following their 4th birthday, so that every child, regardless of where they're born during that cohort year, has access to a full academic year of education in reception. If you are in a situation that was described earlier where your child can't physically start school in September, then you do have the option to defer their entry. So you'd still make an application now, you'd get a school offer in April, you'd accept that offer, and then you'd liaise with the school that's been offered to arrange a start date after September. But you need to accept that offer, and the child will go on roll at that school in the September that they're due to start. There is also another process alongside deferred entry, which is called delayed entry. Now, this is only applicable to children who are classed as summer-born, and summer-born child is anyone with a birth date between the 1st of April and the 31st of August. So children born within that range are classed as summer-born. There is a process where if you have a summer-born child, you can request, and it's not a legal right, you are asking for it only, you can request that that child starts school a year later. So if your child is chronologically due to start school in September 2023, you can make a request that you delay their entry and they start school in reception in September 2024. further details about that process available on our website. I'd also recommend that you read the guidance that's available on our website that we've put together, and that will explain this in more detail. It's not a common occurrence that families decide to ask for a delayed entry. There is usually a reason for it. So, for example, if a child was born extremely prematurely, and their due date would have been September or October of the following cohort year, or there has been there's medical reasons that a child isn't going to be ready to start school in the September they should, and it's really important that you consult with the schools that you'd be interested in applying for. You need to get their agreement before you submit your request. Without their agreement, we won't be able to take it any further. If you've got any documentary evidence of, for example, a medical issue, any special educational needs or disabilities, global development delay, speech and language delay, things like that, and you think your child's not going to be ready for school next September, have a look at our website, have a look at the delayed entry process, speak to the current nursery or earlier years setting, and have a discussion with the schools that you'd like to apply for about it. But that process is there. If you want further information, contact us. We can talk it through with you.
Thanks, Amy. We've got a couple of minutes until this finishes at 8, and there's some questions in the chat that I don't think we've picked up yet, so I just think it's worth us probably doing that. We've got a question here which is, what if we move house in May, June time after the school place is offered? Will that affect the admission? So I think it depends whether you're moving in or out of the county, doesn't it, to some extent?
I think, yeah, you'd need to contact us at that point, and we can discuss how to make an application with you. You can still make the application wherever you live in, but we'd need to discuss it with you further.
Okay, and then there's another question which I think is probably relevant to other people, which is, we live on the border between 3 different catchment areas. Does this mean we will be at a disadvantage for all 3?
So you'll only ever have one catchment school. Some addresses don't have a catchment school. So some people will be applying for school places and they don't have a catchment. It's important that you check that. You can check that on our website. We have priority area maps that you can have a look at. You just move the map around, find your address and click on it, and it'll tell you what your catchment schools are. If you've got more than one school that's close to you, by all means put all 3 schools on your application. Just put them in your order of preference. That's the most important thing. Imagine that we can offer you a place at all the schools. Which one would be your favourite? Which one would you want your child to go to above all of those if they could go anywhere? So always rank the schools in your order of preference.
Thanks, Amy. I've just shared the link to the priority area maps as well. I'll just quickly flick through, see if there's anything else.
There's one about council tax bill, Rebecca. Do you want me to pick that one up?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so there's a question. Can the council tax bill be in the name of the other parent? Both parents are married and living at the same address. One parent has started the application, but the council tax bill is in the other parent's name. Yes, that's absolutely fine, as long as it's the same address as you've put for the child.
Yeah, and there's a sort of a general question here about, is there anything that we can actually do that has an effect on our chances of getting a place at a school aside from moving house? And I think really that's about probably going onto our website and just getting a sense of two things that we've mentioned. So one is where we have offered to in previous years, sort of distance and which criteria on the oversubscription list, and secondly is looking at the individual schools oversubscription. So I think they're the two main things, is really to sort of educate yourself, so you've got a sense. Obviously, if you've already got a sibling at the school, then that will influence your chance. And is there anything with faith schools, Amy, at reception that makes a difference?
If you're applying for a faith school, so Catholic or some C of E, they do ask for additional documentation to be sent to them as part of your application. So just if you are considering applying for any Catholic or C of E schools, have a look at that school's website or contact the school directly and see if they request anything in addition to the application that you do for us. For example, Catholic schools will often request a copy of a child's baptism certificate if the child's baptised. Some faith schools ask for a form to be completed by your priest if you're a regular worshipper. But it's best to contact those schools directly and see what they're asking for, and then send that documentation directly back to the school.
Okay, thanks, Amy. And somebody's just put their hand up, so I think we'll take this as the last question before bringing it to a close. So Laura, if you're still there, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Just a very quick one. Sorry if I've missed it earlier. So just really for clarification, presumably if we that all the applications are dealt with from the deadline onwards, so from the 15th of January onwards, so you wouldn't be at an advantage if you were to submit our application prior to the deadline.
That's right.
Exactly, yes.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
And I have got all the questions that have been put in the chat. So any that we haven't managed to cover, I will put them all in a document and they will be published. So if you have missed the beginning and when we were asking questions, all the answers will be available online.
Lovely, thank you so much, Amy. And as I say, this will the webinar will be put online as well. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope it's been helpful, and enjoy the rest of your evening.